So, hi, I'm Samik Roy Chowdhury. I am doing my PhD from Institute of Development Studies, Calcutta. It is affiliated to Calcutta University, and my PhD supervisor is Dr. Lucy Chowdhury. My PhD mostly relates to citizenship determination in the Indian state of Assam, which is a state that is located in the India-Bangladesh border, and citizenship is one of the major issues in that relation. Um, the title of my presentation abstract, what do we call it, is Why Can't We Deport? The Logistics of Denationalization and Deportation in India. Now, for this presentation, one of the reasons I didn't make a PPT or write finalize a paper was that first of all, the paper that or the ideas that we are discussing in our study group or roundtable currently are still in very primary stages. So it would have been a bit early to finalize or present something with final form. And secondly, the thing is that my research, or I think all of our researchers, are so much located specifically within certain corners of South Asia that if we do not introduce the specific context within which we are doing our research, it may be difficult for a crowd which is maybe not entirely familiar with the political realities of South Asia to follow the specific data and everything that we find during our research. So the purpose of this presentation is solely to introduce my certain observations that I have come across during my PhD field survey, and introduce it to a crowd of people who may not be entirely familiar with the question of South Asia. I'll just take a second. I just need to sort something out. Just 2 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah, extremely sorry for that. Extremely sorry for that. Wait, I'll just turn on the. Yeah. So, so for this presentation, I thought what would be, the way I could, communicate to a purple audience maybe. So I decided let's start with Donald Trump and United States, right? So as all of you might know that the United States has recently deported a certain amount of Indian illegal immigrants from their country. And surprisingly or unsurprisingly, surprisingly for you guys and unsurprisingly for me, this has the fact that the United States was able to deport illegal Indian immigrants from their country has now led to demand made by Indians that we should do the same with illegal Bangladeshis who are currently residing in our country. So, but deportation is a very difficult issue to talk about because the Indian state has found it very difficult to deport illegal immigrants to Bangladesh, and the situation is so bad that even people who have been identified as Bangladeshi and who have also been imprisoned because they are Bangladeshi, even those people who have been imprisoned for a period of over 5 years, the Indian state has not been able to deport these individuals. And this has been a matter of frustration within the government circles in India, with the Honorable Supreme Court of India recently stating in a while hearing a certain petition regarding the living condition in detention center. So the Supreme Court of India specifically pulled up the Indian government and said, why have you not deported people who have been imprisoned for a period which stretches beyond 4 to 5 years, right? So So currently, in India, there is one particular transit camp or a detention camp where which houses 63 individuals who have been identified by the Indian state as being Bangladeshi nationals. And the Indian state has not been able to deport them, and most of them have been held captive for a period more than 5 years. So now, obviously, then this then brings me to my title and my question that why can't we deport? So I think the best way or the starting point to answer this question has to be, we have to look at the justification or the excuses given by the Indian state. So the Indian state, whenever the topic of deportation will come up, they will tell us that there is no repatriation treaty with Bangladesh, right? And because there is no repatriation treaty, every case of deport, every time we need to deport an individual, it has to be dealt in a case by case manner. So you cannot deport a group of people. You have to deport everybody one by one, and that is obviously much more time consuming. And because you have to go through every case, what becomes very essential is that the person who the Indian state has identified as a Bangladeshi provides a particular address in Bangladesh. So if I am, let's say, identified as an illegal Bangladeshi, illegally residing in India, I have to provide an address in Bangladesh. And why is that important? That is important because the Bangladesh government, irrespective of the regime that is in power, the Bangladesh government isn't just going to believe the Indian Prime Minister when he says that okay, Samik is an illegal Bangladeshi, he's Bangladeshi, so he needs to be taken back. The Bangladeshi government needs to conduct a process of verification and verify that I am a resident of Bangladesh. So in the case of these 63 individuals, right, they have not, even though they have been imprisoned for more than 5 years, they have not provided any address in Bangladesh, right? So in popular narrative, this is always read as, oh yeah, they don't want to go back to Bangladesh, right? Like, oh, they're doing quite well in India. They don't want to go back because Bangladesh is, less developed than India. Now there are, fundamental flaws in that narrative, as there are with most popular narratives, because especially when you look at the ground reality, it is for an extended amount of time. As I said, these people have been in detention for almost a decade, some of them. For the majority of that time, they were not kept in a specialized detention or a transit camp. They were kept in prison, along with murderers, rapists, thieves, and etc. Right? So it's not as if they were kept in a good facility or anything, right? So it is not so to argue that they don't want to go back because they are quite comfortable in India is nonsensical when you take a look at the ground reality. So what can be the second, what can be a different, alternative explanation for these 63 individuals saying that, we don't have an address in Bangladesh. Now, you can theorize, or even I can theorize, but what I personally feel is that maybe these 63 individuals are not from Bangladesh. Maybe they did not enter India illegally. Maybe they have nothing to do with Bangladesh. Now, hold that thought, because this paradoxical juncture that we find ourselves in requires that we look into how the question of migration control, border control, and citizenship is very unique in India and the South Asian subcontinent by extension, right? So, if we look at literature on border and migration control in the Western Hemisphere, the first world countries, the focus is always on how developed societies or first world countries respond to migration flows, be it legal or illegal. And the theorizations that have come up have solely focused on migration management or migration control or border control, and how these policies are at times based on racial stereotypes, based on racial biases, And those theorizations have been quite important to my work. I don't say that they are not important to my work, but that is fundamentally very different from the Indian context. Because in the Indian context, we see that the illegal immigrant is almost always assumed to be a Bangladeshi. Now this is weird, right? Because in the Western European or the North American context, the illegal immigrant is not necessarily assumed to be from a singular country. Maybe in the case of United States, but other countries are also, immigrants from other countries are also not viewed very favorably there, right? So, but in the case of India, the illegal immigrant is almost always a Bengali-speaking Muslim. Right, a Bengali-speaking Muslim who has a thick beard, has a darker skin tone compared to Hindu Bengali. So I am a Hindu Bengali. So, they are quote unquote supposed to have a darker skin tone than me. And there's a this is basically the dog whistle that is used to because remember India has a substantial population of Bengali Muslims who are legitimately Indian. So this is mostly used as a dog whistle to curtail their rights. So in the Indian case, the illegal immigrant is assumed to have already crossed into India. Additionally, it is also assumed that the illegal immigrant is living amongst us. The illegal immigrant has, somehow, the illegal immigrant has more or less hidden themselves among the legitimate Indian citizens. Now, here, the illegal immigrant is always assumed to be mimicking the Indian citizen. And so here we see a very clear break in the manner in which immigration is seen or migration is seen in the in Western Europe or North America and India, where in Western Europe or North America or the other first world countries, migration is always, or policies of migration control or border control, they always more or less directly or indirectly emphasize emphasize a very, maybe unspoken, maybe very subtle, but there is a hierarchy, there is a difference which is very visible in the manner in which policies of border control and migration control are drafted, right? But in the Indian context, what we see is that when we draft policies of border control or migration control or policies that are geared towards identifying people who are illegally residing in India, the basic thesis or the basis on which these policies are based on is the principle of indistinguishability. So the idea is always that we need very stringent and very pervasive laws which can clearly demarcate a legitimate Indian from an illegitimate Indian, right? So here the burden of, so here if you are charged with, let's say, being a Bangladeshi, let's say I am charged with being a Bangladeshi, right? So what can the document be that I can show to, prove that I am not a Bangladeshi, I am an Indian. So would a voter card do? Voter cards are in India used to cast their votes. So you have to show the voter card and vote. There's another card called PAN card that is for tax purposes, and then there's ration card. And Aadhaar card is again identity. None of these documents, be it the voter card, be it the PAN card, be it the Aadhaar card, or be it the ration card, none of these documents prove citizenship. Like I can have all these documents and present it to the judge. And the judge will say, no, none of these documents prove citizenship. The reasoning behind such a high burden of proof has always been that these documents can easily be faked. So illegal immigrant coming from Bangladesh who looks more or less like me, speaks more or less the same language as me, can easily imitate me by acquiring these documents. So the standard of proving your Indianness has to be set at an unreasonably high. The bar is set unreasonably high. So there are two unique things about migration control and border control in India. First, that the border is no more a physical entity. The borders are interest, and the borders have more or less become something, have acquired a very unique social saying. and the tendency of bordering and the tendency of finger pointing has become quite common in the Indian society, especially in the region where I live, which is West Bengal, which again shares a border with Bangladesh, right? And the second thing is the policies of migration control or the policies of border control are always articulated as corrective policy, as in, oh, already so many people have come, so we need a very stringent and very, very pervasive law, which would correct the mistakes that have been made by the past regime in allowing millions and millions of Bangladeshi to intrude on our territory. So, okay, so obviously you can see how discriminatory and how um, laden with anxiety is discourse of migration control and border control in India is. Now, obviously, this is not entirely unreasonable when you consider the history of South Asia, especially three countries, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, which were under the colonial rule, and then the history of partition and the ensuing migration and everything, and how unscientific and how problematic the partition itself was. So these things are very much rooted in the history of India. But what I actually wanted to point out in this presentation was that, okay, so there are millions and millions of Bangladeshis coming to India, and this is not only a popular perception, but the judiciary, the legislature, the executive in India all agree that there are almost 10 million to 15 million Bangladeshis illegally residing in India, most of whom happen to be in West Bengal, the state where I live in, and Assam, the state where I do my research in. Right. So if that is the case, what would be the logical, thing to do? What would be the logical thing to do? There are, 15 million illegal Bangladeshis living in India. So the political establishment or the polity will get together, they legislate, and then come up with laws that, get rid of it. So non-Indians, people outside India must really think that, there's really strong legislation that deals with illegal immigration from Bangladesh, which is not the case. The legislation or the law that we follow to distinguish between Indian and a Bangladeshi is called the Foreigners Law. The Foreigners Law was introduced by the colonial regime in 1939. It was called the Foreigners Ordinance. And then the Foreigners Act was then another ordinance was introduced in 1940. And the act was finally introduced in 1946. This particular act was introduced during or around the Second World War by the colonial regime to deal with foreign nationals who overstayed in colonial India. So this is the irony of the situation, that the paranoia surrounding the Bangladeshi in India is based on this perception that it is very difficult to distinguish a legally Indian citizen from a illegal Bangladeshi. So the argument is that they are not distinguishable. They are very indistinguishable. But the law that the Indian state uses to distinguish these two people was created by a regime which was concerned about identifying and imprisoning people who are visibly, racially, and ethnically different from people in India, right? And this then helps us, kind of verify what Chen constantly brings up in his book, that just because the nationalist movement in third world countries was successful, that does not mean that the governmental structures and the ratio and the logic of governmentality that was introduced during the colonial period were done away with. Rather, these logics have been reframed to justify or legitimize the the territorial and the sovereign authority of third world countries. India being one of the major examples of this. So So again, let's come back to the initial question. So maybe these people, these 660 people, were not from Bangladesh at all, right? Like, because I have had the opportunity to interview many people who have been declared to be Bangladeshi by the Indian government. They have spent a period of more than 3 to 4 years in detention camps, and I have had the opportunity to interview. And in every instance, they have personally shown me voter ID cards. They have personally shown me Aadhaar cards. They have shown me land records, which date back to 1960. Now remember, the cutoff date in my field, Assam, is 1971. So, so they have shown me documents which even, me being a Hindu, me being from the majority community will not have. But they have still been declared to be foreign by the foreigner tribunals, which are a quasi-judicial body that function in Assam, and they are, they deal with citizenship determination. So we are dealing with a context where we have a government which is hell-bent on classifying its own citizens as illegal immigrants, or not illegal immigrants actually, that would be a misnomer. By law, the people who are declared to be foreigners by the foreigner tribunals in Assam are by definition, by definition in Indian law, Bangladeshis. So we have a government hell-bent on converting Indians into Bangladesh. So that is the discourse of denationalization that is entirely based on a law that was introduced in India by the colonial powers. Now, just to conclude here, because this seminar or this discussion has focused on protest, the question then obviously that I had to confront a few years ago when I started off my research is that how do you protest something like this? Because these laws only exist because of popular support. Whatever I said today or whatever I have presented to you are not popular perception. Almost to most people, these 63 individuals are Bangladeshi. They have no right to exist in India. And that is the popular perception pan-India, and that is especially the perception in my research field, Assam, where most of them feel that these individuals do not have any right to be in India. So within these contexts, how do you build solidarity? Then how do you protest? What I have noticed is that most individuals who are involved in fighting for the rights of people like these do it not through building public consensus, but by going way and beyond their own individual capacity, investing their own money, investing their own time, risking their own life. And that is how they help these people and also then protest against the, indirectly or directly protest against the violence inflicted by the state upon its own citizens. So in conclusion, regarding protests, I can say that protests need not always be very popular. They're at times done in individual capacities, and that is what I have noticed in that case. So I'll just end my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samik. Thanks so much. That was a very, very insightful and provocative discussion of those issues you're researching.